Hey artists, today you will be learning about the stages of clay because as you know, this upcoming week we will start to work with clay. Hey, this is a ceramics class. Finally, we get to touch some clay. So it's important before you start working with clay to have a better understanding of its drying process, its firing process, just how does clay start from mud and turn into beautiful pottery that you can use in everyday life. So this presentation will teach you all about that. Feel free to take some notes if you would like, because after this you'll be taking a quiz in Canvas that goes over some of the vocabulary you will be learning. We'll do some review on Tuesday in class. For the quiz, it's low stakes. You can do multiple attempts. It's just to share your learning and understanding so far. So feel free to take a moment, get out a notebook and pencil, and mostly just watch along. All right. So the stages of clay, again, how does this is kind of what the clay looks like in your supply kits, turn into this? I'm sure you all have eaten out of bowls that are made from clay or drinking out of mugs that are made from clay, used vases made from clay. So how do we get it from here to here? What is that process like? That's what we'll be learning about today. All right, so stage one, we will call that raw clay. So raw clay is what you can consider the clay that is in your supply kits as it is right now. Um, these are some pictures actually from the old high school of where we would make clay. So when you touch clay, wet clay, it's going to be slightly sticky. Like this is going to be the messiest time where it kind of sticks on your fingers a little bit. This is where it's really workable, it's pliable, you can roll it in coils, roll it in slabs, pinch it, shape it. You can throw with it on the wheel. This is where you actually like make your sculptures or make your pieces. Let's say you make something and you just aren't happy with it, you can recycle clay. So if we were in the school, you would be able to throw it in a slop barrel. So that's where we would just have it a big garbage can full of water and you would just break up your clay into little pieces and then we would use that to recycle. So here are dry ingredients. We would put that in a clay mixer with the slop. So the old clay that you used plus dry ingredients becomes the raw clay that you use. So it's really cool that clay can be recycled at this stage. And clay is super forgiving. So if something starts to crack or break, you can just add it back on. You can smooth out any areas, fix mistakes. It's really forgiving when it's this raw clay stage. Next, we get to the leather hard stage. So this is an in-between. It's not totally dried out yet, but it's not brand new wet clay yet either. So leather hard. And just think of that word leather and like the texture of leather, where it's very smooth, kind of cool to the touch. At this stage, it's slightly more dry, it's stiff. As I said, if you were to touch leather hard clay, you'll feel that it's a little bit cool because clay is full of water and water is going to be a little bit cooler than air temperature. Just like if you go into a lake on a hot day, usually the water is refreshing, it feels cool. So at the leather hard stage, when there's still water, moisture in the clay, it's going to feel cooler. You can see the color of the clay. It's still kind of that darker gray color. If you have any mistakes in your piece, let's say a part breaks off or anything like that, it's a little bit more difficult to fix. It's not impossible at this stage. You can always add water. We'll talk about what slip is and fix it. But if there's any more mistakes, that can be an issue. And also for many artists, this is a stage where some cracking can occur. So sometimes if you have like a big platter, you'll get cracks on the bottom as it starts to dry. Because as it dries, it might kind of start to warp depending on how you made it. So cracking sometimes occurs when it's leather hard. However, let's say again, if you're in our studio at the school or any ceramic studio, if you mess up and something's leather hard, it's already started to dry out, you can still recycle it. So you could still break it up into small pieces, add water, and it will be reusable clay again, which is super cool. And this is your last chance when it's the leather hard stage to add more details, finish anything up. So it's really hard to add a lot of details and texture when the clay is wet because it's just too sticky. It's hard to manipulate in that way. It's hard to get fine details and good craftsmanship. But once it's leather hard, this is where you can carve in your details. If you were making a ceramic mug, you would add your handle at this stage. If you threw a pot on the wheel, we do something called making a foot, which you'll be doing for your project as well. So you could trim a foot on the wheel. You'd put your initials and class period carved on the bottom. And if you were adding color to it, you'd also add underglaze at this stage. So this is a stage, again, where it's very important to finish your work. You don't want it to get past this stage into stage 3 and have it be unfinished. That would be bad news. So stage 2, leather hard. Stage 3, we've got bone dry. So this is where there is no more moisture in the clay. It's all, for the most part, evaporated. So you can see the difference in color. This would be a bone dry piece. This would still be wet clay or even leather hard clay. So you can see as it dries, it gets much lighter in color, at least with the clay that we use in our school. Most clay will get lighter. It might not all look exactly like this color though. So at the bone dry stage, clay is completely dry, lighter in color. Remember how with the leather hard, I said it still feels cool if you touch it because of the moisture. When it's bone dry, it feels like room temperature. There's no more water that's changing that temperature. And at this stage, if your project broke or had cracks in it, it's kind of bad, like too bad. There's not much you can do. There's a few things that we can do. Sometimes adding vinegar will re-moisten that area. Vinegar is a really light acid, so it will start to disintegrate that clay and you can kind of smooth it out. But for the most part, you want it to just be as is once it's at the bone dry stage. This stage of clay can also be recycled. So if your project got completely dried up, but you didn't want to fire it, or you didn't want to do anything with it, or it broke, you could still break it into small pieces, put it in water, and that will turn into workable clay again. But it's important to note this is the most fragile stage of clay. So at this stage, it's really easy for it to get chipped or break if you don't handle it carefully. So for our project, I'm giving students the option if they want to bring it to the high school for me to fire it, which will be the next stage. When you are transporting it, if you choose to do that, you'll have to just be very careful, understand that it can break really easily. All right. So in the ceramic world, we call the process of putting your project, this is a kiln, the process of putting it in that kiln to get it to the next stage is called firing your work. So in these electric kilns that we have at the high school that you see right here, there's not actual fire that's going on. There are like wood firing processes that you can use for clay, but we don't do that in our high school. But it's still called firing your work, and these are called kilns. Please do not call them an oven. They go much hotter than your oven. So the first step will be turning it into bisqueware, which we'll learn for the next stage. So any clay that has not been fired yet, we call greenware. So that includes raw clay, that includes leather hard clay, and that includes bone dry clay. If it's not gone in the kiln, it's greenware, unfired clay. After your clay has come out of the kiln once, it's been fired once, we call it bisqueware. So it's going to be the next stage of clay. So for the first kiln firing, we fire it between cone O5 and O6. So in ceramics, in clay, pottery world, we call the different firing temperatures cones. And the reason for that is when you are firing in your kiln, you'll put these little cone packs inside. And the cones, like they're literally shaped like a cone, they'll start to bend at different temperatures. So this is really important when you are doing like a wood fire and you have different temperatures around the kiln that might not all be uniform. You can kind of peek at those different cone packs and see when are they starting to lean. A cone might start to lean at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. So then you would know, okay, it's at O cone, or if you had an O5 cone, it would start to lean there and you would understand that temperature. So for the first firing, our clay, if we fire it at cone O5 or cone O6, that goes up to about 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really, really hot. So yes, hotter than what your oven does. So it will go into the kiln, and that's when it comes out is the fourth stage, bisqueware. So not Bisquick, but bisqueware. So when it is bisqueware, it's firmer. The clay is porous, so it's going to soak up water. So it's not ready to like drink out of. I couldn't put coffee in this and drink from it yet. It's porous. It's soaking up water, kind of like a sponge. It's going to be lighter in color, even lighter than when it was bone dry. It has more of this white hue, at least with the clay that you'll be using. And it is kind of brittle. So like any pottery, you can smash it and break it. This is much more stable than when it's bone dry, but it's still kind of breakable. You have to be careful when you're handling it. When you have some bisqueware and you use your fingernail, go on the side of it, it makes a ting, ting, ting sound. Sometimes students have gotten confused if it was bisqueware yet or if it was bone dry, like had it been fired in the kiln yet. So I tell students to do that little tap sound. Can you hear that tinging? That will let you know. At this stage, if there is any cracking that happened in the kiln, it can't really be fixed at this point. It's as is. We also cannot recycle it anymore. So once the clay is fired, it's going to be like this for the rest of our lives, unless we grind it down into a powder or something. But at this point, we can't recycle it. So that's bisqueware, the first time it goes into the kiln. All right, so normally in school, this is where you would glaze your work. So glaze is where that's the material that you add to get it to be all colorful and pretty. For us, I'm not sure if we'll get to glaze it during our class, but hopefully you'll get an opportunity at some point to glaze it or paint it. So at this stage, this is where you glaze it. So once I had my mug, it came out of the kiln, it's bisqueware, then I would glaze it, and then I'd put it on the shelf to wait for it to get fired again to get to the next stage. So after it's bisqued, here you can see some pictures of bisqueware that has been glazed. So after applying glaze to your work, fired for a second time at a higher temperature. So at our school, we normally fire, it's called an oxidation firing, to cone 6. So no longer O6, but just cone 6. So we're about here, it fires to about 2200 degrees Fahrenheit. So even hotter this stage. There's also a reduction kiln and the old school that we used to use that would fire even hotter, and that did have a live flame that was used with gas versus electricity, like our kilns. That would go to about 24, 2500 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is this stage 5 glazeware. So this is it at the end. It's glassy oftentimes. Sometimes the glaze can have more of a matte finish, or it can be glossy, and it's vitrified. And that means that it is sealed off. So now I can drink coffee from a mug once there's glaze inside. Now I can eat off of the food on the plate because it's sealed off. Now I can put flowers and water in a vase. And if it was just Bisqueware, it would soak up that water and kind of leak through. But now that it's been fired to that higher temperature and that we have that glaze on it, it's vitrified. Again, I can't alter it. I can't really change it. I can't reglaze it. If it came out and I didn't like the color, I'm out of luck. I just have to do it again. I can't recycle it at this time. These pieces will literally be on Earth with us for hundreds of thousands of years. Right? This is how we know so much about ancient civilization, is because the pottery that they made and the designs that they made on them. It really lasts a long time. So just, take care of everything that you make because it will be with us for a while. And I love this part of ceramics. I love that we can make beautiful art that we use for all different things. Any of your pottery that's been glaze fired can go in a dishwasher, sink, you can wash it. It can go in a microwave, and it can go in your oven. So that's pretty cool. And this is a good image to show the before and after. So this is a picture of Bisqueware with glaze on it. So the glaze will look really kind of dusty, soft. I don't know how else to describe it. Kind of like frosting almost, except a little bit thinner. So the colors change a lot when they go into the kiln with the heat. The color of this does not, it's not what it's going to look like at the end. So just depending, there's a lot of chemistry actually when we look at what goes into a glaze that will determine what its colors look like when it comes out. So it does change a lot in that process. And then this is kind of a separate stage of clay that's important to note, called slip, which if you remember from ever working with clay in elementary or middle school, this probably sounds familiar. Slip is basically clay and water. The consistency is kind of like yogurt. For slip, we use it to join two pieces of clay together. So you don't have any slip in your kit, but you could easily make some if you had a little bowl or a dish, took a little bit of clay, broke it up with some water and mixed it together, let it sit a little bit, you can make your own slip. If the slip dries out, you just add more water. So when we get working on our project, I'll talk to you about what can you use for slip, how can we make that work. You'll need water, but it won't be too tricky. All right, so here is a quick review. Our first stage of clay, this is the clay that you all have. We call that raw clay. When it starts to dry out a bit, this is where you will add your details, carve in anything, leather hard. It's a little bit more smooth, more firm, until it's totally dried out, lighter in color, but very brittle, very breakable, is bone dry. Think of bones breaking, or maybe not, it's kind of weird. All of these stages we can call greenware because it hasn't gone in the kiln yet. It's unfired clay. Then it goes into the kiln, and when it comes out for the first time, we have Bisqueware. It's ready to get glazed. This is the fun process to think about what color do you want. And then that last stage, sorry, the word's hidden, glazeware. So that's our final stage of clay. All right, so feel free to watch this video or take any more notes or go on back if you need to see something again. But now you'll be taking a quiz on Canvas called Stages of Clay. And this will just go through some of the vocab and processes that we talked about. This quiz will have multiple attempts, so it's low pressure. I just want you to share with me what you learned and also share with me what do we need more practice on, if anything. All right, so thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy your day.